The world screams for attention. It begs to be seen, to be heard, to be validated. But the more a self is shown, the more they will try to pull it down. That is the brutal, unchangeable nature of the game. People project their own fears onto anyone who rises, their own insecurities, their own bitter judgments, onto anyone who dares to climb out of the bucket. So a new art must be learned, the art of disappearing. Not as a retreat into cowardice, but as a rebellion into power. Silence becomes the ultimate weapon. Solitude becomes the sacred forge. A step back is taken, not to hide from the world, but to rebuild the self away from its corrosive gaze. In the shadows, a stripping away begins. Every label the world has applied is peeled off. Every opinion, every expectation, every limit, slapped on by those who do not understand the mission. There, in the profound, deafening quiet, the real self is met, raw, untamed, unbroken, unshakable. This act of disappearing is not a sign of weakness. It is the highest form of strategy, a cessation of all explanations, a refusal to broadcast every move, like the rest of the noise addicts and validation junkies. The mouth is shut because silence cannot be attacked. It cannot be misquoted. It cannot be criticized. The less they know about the plan, the less ammunition they have to shoot it down. The plans, the pain, the daily progress, all sacred, all private, all owned. Every single word that is withheld becomes a weapon. Speak less, build more. The approval sought is internal, not external. The only judge that matters is the one in the mirror. The world worships the currency of attention, but attention is a trap. It is a prison. It makes a soul dependent on the whims of the crowd. It makes a spirit a slave to the algorithm. The only opinion that ever truly matters is the internal one. Others will always misunderstand. They will project. They will mock. Let them. Their words are just noise, wind rattling a locked door. They cannot touch what they cannot see. The chase for external validation is abandoned, a state of caring what anyone thinks is shed. Because their applause will not build the future, and their criticism cannot break a will forged in silence. The vision is protected like a secret, sacred fire. It is small at first, flickering in the dark, but it is relentless. It is fed in the silence of the early mornings, with the wood of discipline, with the oxygen of focus, until it grows into a raging, uncontrollable inferno, something that no one can ignore and no one can extinguish. This fire is not for them, it is for the self. It is the light that guides the path through the darkness. Progress is hidden. It is kept secret. The grind is not posted about, it is lived. The small daily wins are not shared for cheap claps. They are turned into internal, high-octane fuel. Every single moment spent in quiet, focused work is a moment more control is gained. The self becomes unpredictable, unreadable, unstoppable. People will wonder what happened, where the old self went. But by the time they find out the answer, the new self will already be light years ahead. The shadows are a sanctuary. The growth is private. It is sacred. It is untouchable.
The pain is kept close. It is held tight. The bleeding happens in silence. The failures happen without any witnesses. Because the world does not deserve the struggle. It only wants to consume the story once it is polished and safe. The Stoics were right about this. Pain is the source of power, not a badge for pity. A person endures, they rebuild, they rise again, alone. Every scar becomes a private map of resilience, not something to be posted online for sympathy likes. The struggle is the secret ingredient. It is not for public consumption. In the dark, purpose is defined with brutal clarity. This clarity becomes an obsession. Life, breath, and blood are given for what is wanted. All distractions are crushed without mercy. Discipline becomes the new religion. The only dogma is the code of execution. Every single second is given a mission. The mind is reprogrammed, rewired, rebuilt. Doubt is starved until it dies. Focus is sharpened into a razor's edge. And a rugged, quiet confidence becomes the default setting. The conversation about potential stops. The process of becoming it begins. When the reappearance finally happens, it will not even matter who notices. The spotlight will feel irrelevant, a childish distraction, because something far better has been found in the silence, a quiet peace, a cold power, a calm dominance that comes from knowing, without a single doubt, exactly who one is and what one has been built from. The shadows will no longer be a hiding place. They will have become a throne, because the world does not need to see the messy process. It only ever deserves to witness the final, undeniable transformation. The modern world is an arena of noise, a constant, shrieking battle for every last scrap of attention. To participate in that battle is to lose. It is to become just another voice in the screaming void. The ultimate act of power is to refuse to play the game, to withdraw, to become silent, to disappear. This is not a retreat. This is a strategic repositioning to a battlefield where the self has the ultimate advantage, the battlefield of the internal world.
In that silence, the real work begins. The work of untangling the self from the world's opinions. The work of dismantling the identity that has been assigned and building a new one from the bedrock of personal values. This is a brutal, lonely, terrifying process. It requires facing the parts of the self that have been hidden, the weaknesses, the fears, the comfortable lies, and it requires executing them one by one, without an audience, without applause, without sympathy. The less is said, the more is heard. The internal voice, the voice of intuition, of purpose. It is a quiet voice. It cannot be heard over the roar of the crowd. It can only be heard in the profound stillness of solitude. This voice is the only guide that matters. It is the compass that points to true north. The world will try to give 1,000 different maps, all leading to its own desired destinations. The warrior must burn those maps and learn to navigate by the stars of their own inner sky.
The progress that is shared too early is progress that is vulnerable to the frost of other people's doubt. An idea, a new venture, a personal transformation is like a small seedling. It needs to be protected in the greenhouse of private effort until its roots are strong enough to withstand the storm. Too many people take their fragile seedling and they plant it in the middle of a public square in winter, and they are shocked when it dies. Protect the seedling. Nurture it in the dark. Let its roots grow deep and strong. Then, when it is an unbreakable oak tree, let the world see what has been built. The pain of growth is a sacred thing. It is the sound of the old self breaking to make way for the new. To share that sacred process with the unworthy, with the cynics, the critics, the casual observers, is a form of profanity. It is to take something holy and to cast it before swine. The struggle is a private conversation between a person and their potential. It does not need a witness. It does not need a commentator. It only needs a warrior who is willing to endure it. The darkness is not an enemy. It is a classroom. It is where the most important lessons are learned. the lessons of resilience, of self-reliance, of an unbreakable will. The world worships the light, the stage, the performance, but the real strength is built in the shadows. The muscles of character are developed in the lonely reps of showing up when no one is watching. The person who is not afraid of the dark is a person who can never truly be defeated, because they know how to create their own light. When the time comes to re-emerge, the self will not be the same. The old needs will have fallen away. The need for validation, for approval, for recognition. These will seem like the childish cravings of a former life. The new self is powered by an internal engine, fueled by purpose, driven by discipline, guided by an inner code. It does not need the world's applause to run. It runs on a higher, cleaner, more powerful form of energy, the energy of a promise kept to oneself. The throne of shadows is a throne of sovereignty. It is the seat of a king or queen in their own kingdom, the kingdom of their own mind, their own choices, their own life. They are no longer a servant to the opinions of the crowd. They are the master of their own internal world. And because they have mastered that world, they can move through the external world with a quiet, powerful grace. They are not swayed by the praise or the criticism. They are anchored to something deeper, something realer, their own unshakable sense of self. This is the path of the silent warrior, the path of the invisible builder, the path of the one who works in the dark so they can own the light. It is not a path for everyone. It is not an easy path. It requires a level of discipline and self-trust that is rare. It requires the courage to be alone, the strength to be silent, and the will to build an empire that no one else can see until it is already finished.
The world will continue to scream for attention. Let it scream. The validation junkies will continue to perform for their likes. Let them perform. The critics will continue to criticize from the cheap seats. Let them criticize. None of it matters. None of it is real. The only thing that is real is the work. The quiet, focused, disciplined, relentless work that is being done in the solitude of the forge. The work of building a new self. A self that is made of steel, not of smoke. A self that is defined by its actions, not by its audience. So disappear. Fade into the shadows of your own relentless effort. Shut your mouth, close the door, turn off the noise. Go to war with the weak parts of yourself, and do it in brutal, beautiful, glorious silence. Build your strength, sharpen your mind, forge your will. And when you are done, when you have been reborn in the darkness, then and only then, re-emerge. Not as a performer seeking applause, but as a force of nature. A quiet, calm, unstoppable storm that the world has no choice but to reckon with. The time for talking is over. The time for disappearing has begun. The game is rigged against the loud, the ones who need to be seen at every step, because their internal validation is weak. The game is won by the silent, the ones who can delay the gratification of applause for the ultimate prize of mastery. They understand that attention is a liability, not an asset. It invites attack, it creates pressure, it breeds distraction. Silence is the ultimate asset. It creates mystery, it preserves focus, it builds power. The less said, the more is built. The less seen, the more is done. This is the code of the quiet professional. The pain of loneliness on this path is a filter. It filters out the ones who are not truly committed, the ones who need the warmth of the herd to survive. The warrior must learn to find warmth in the fire of their own mission. They must learn to be their own company, their own counsel, their own harshest critic, their own greatest ally. The loneliness is not a sign that something is wrong. It is a sign that the person is on the right path, the path that very few are willing to walk. The high, hard, lonely road to real strength. The final transformation will be silent. It will not be announced with a trumpet. It will be a quiet, internal shift, a moment when the old self finally dies, and the new self takes its place at the command center. A moment when the approval of others becomes completely and totally irrelevant, not because of arrogance, but because of a deep, unshakable certainty in one's own values, one's own mission, one's own power. That is the victory. That is the prize. A state of internal freedom that no one can ever take away, because no one ever gave it in the first place. It was earned, in the dark, alone. So the question is not, what will you do? The question is, where will you do it? In the bright, noisy, distracting arena of the world, where you are a performer at the mercy of the crowd? Or in the dark, silent, sacred forge of your own solitude, where you are the master craftsman of your own soul? The choice of the venue determines the outcome of the work. Choose the forge, choose the silence, choose the shadows, and build something that will cast a long, undeniable shadow of its own when it is finally brought into the light. The work is waiting. The silence is calling. Disappear.